Which Pokemon have aged the worst? Once feared and respected for their competitive excellence, but now laughed at and considered completely unviable. Let's list various examples of Pokemon that have aged like milk, and then declare one winner who has aged the worst. First up we have Bronzong, a Pokemon with a rich cultural origin. Bronzong is based on Bianzhong, an ancient Chinese bronze bell. And with such a rich cultural origin, of course Bronzong would succeed in a competitive environment. When Bronzong came out in Generation 4, it was excellent. Bronzong's stats might not look like much, but its defenses are actually really solid for the time. And what really gave it such competitive success was its typing and ability. Steel Psychic, at this point in the franchise, was an excellent type combo. Steel still resisted Ghost and Dark, remember, so the weaknesses that Psychic suffers from are completely erased. Psychic also complements Steel by erasing its fighting weakness, and this typing generally just has a lot of great immunities and resistances. The ability Levitate is also perfect, granting ground immunity, erasing another one of Steel's weaknesses. Defensively, Bronzong is spectacular, largely due to this typing and ability combo. It also has a fantastic utility move pool. Bronzong crucially has Stealth Rock, the new best move in the game in Gen 4. It is slow and can take advantage of Gyro Ball to use that low speed to its advantage. This is a steel attack that deals more damage the slower you are than the target. Bronzong also has Explosion to go out with a bang and trade with enemies. And Bronzong is generally one of the most powerful defensive utility steel types. It sets itself apart from others by being immune to ground, which is an incredible trait, as well as being pretty offensively potent too. Even though its attack is only 89, the Gyro Ball hits hard, it has Earthquake for great coverage, and Explosion is always an excellent offensive tool. So what happened? Bronzong seemed so untouchable, so amazing. And yet today, Bronzong is ranked all the way down in the NU tier, considered a pretty low tier Pokemon, scarcely ever used in high-level competitive teams. The cracks really started to form for Bronzong in Generation 6. In Gen 5, even though it wasn't officially ranked in OU, it still held onto solid viability, and its access to Levitate set it apart from other steel types. Its move pool was also still usable enough. But in Gen 5, the nerf to Explosion's damage output was bad for Bronzong, but that was the only real significant hint Bronzong had at that time. Gen 6, though, was when a bigger issue arose. In Gen 6, the Steel type was nerfed defensively to no longer be resistant to Ghost and Dark, and that turned the Steel Psychic type combo into a much worse one immediately. Overnight, one of the main benefits of this typing was out the window, because now Bronzong was wide open to Dark and Ghost type attacks, gaining two weaknesses, ruining its defensive capabilities. This coincided with the addition of the move Knock Off, one of the most powerful moves in the game, and a Dark type attack. While all Steel types did suffer from this, Pokemon like Ferrothorn and Skarmory still held on strong. They could still take these neutral Dark and Ghost type attacks. But Steel Psychic types suffered massively, as they were weak to the types that they used to be neutral to, which is much worse. Ferrothorn was already taking Bronzong's job much of the time in Gen 5, but it became even more of a problem from Gen 6 onwards, as Bronzong's unique qualities were less valuable with these glaring weaknesses, dragging it down into the pits. As time has gone on, the years have not been kind to Bronzong. The power level and average stats of Pokemon in OU have only gone up, and Bronzong's once impressive bulk no longer feels so impressive. Bronzong's move pool was also once considered excellent. Stealth Rock, Gyro Ball, Explosion, all amazing options. But now, Bronzong is competing with Pokemon who have Knockoff to remove items, and Pivoting, and Rapid Spin to remove hazards, and all this incredible utility that Bronzong just doesn't have. Bronzong's move pool feels quite shallow now in Gen 9, compared to contemporaries. Much like the real Bianzhong of ancient China, people aren't playing big bells made out of bronze anymore as an instrument. They've moved on to instruments such as a guitar and piano. Even the triangle is considered a more powerful instrument than Bianzhong in the modern day. They say that you can't unring a bell, and Bronzong's bell was rung long ago, and we can no longer hear its sound. And how about Reuniclus? Reuniclus was one of the best Pokemon when it came out in Generation 5. In fact, many people throughout Gen 5's lifespan wanted this thing banned, it was that good. Reuniclus has everything going for it in this metagame. This Pokemon has the ability Magic Guard, one of the strongest abilities in the whole game, granting a complete immunity to all indirect damage. So it's immune to hazards and sandstorm and poison and leech seed and anything that isn't a direct attack. An insanely OP ability. And in the past, Clefable was OU level and one of the strongest Pokemon in the game due to having this ability. And that was a normal type with terrible stats, whereas Reuniclus has actual good stats. It has 110 HP, which is fantastic. An excellent 125 special attack, and good enough defenses alongside the HP to be really tanky. Reuniclus is one of the best ramping boost sweepers in the game, with Calm Mind and the ability to chip heal in the Sandstorm to be completely impervious to Toxic. Sometimes you just simply cannot defeat this guy. It ramps to the point of no return and sweeps your entire team. It can even be aggressive with Trick Room and run a Life Orb and take no recoil damage because it's immune. Reuniclus fits very well on Sand and Hail teams due to being immune to the damaging weather effects. And it's a very difficult Pokemon to deal with sometimes. It can even take on Tyranitar. It's bulky enough to survive a Cruncher or Pursuit and KO them with a Focus Blast. So what happened to this absolute titan of Generation 5 OU? Because today in Gen 9, Reuniclus is ranked all the way down in the NU tier, a shell of its former self. Reuniclus has suffered from a few different things over the years. Much like Bronzong, it certainly didn't help that Ghost and Dark type attacks became so much more prominent in the game, and therefore all Psychic types suffered. But Reuniclus also suffered from newfound competition with a Pokemon it used to outclass. Clefable. Clefable in Gen 6 had its type changed from normal to Fairy, and this simple change was an incredible buff. Fairy is one of the best mono typings you can have, with only 2 weaknesses to Steel and Poison. Very easy to cover elsewhere in a team and not common attacking types, while having so many great defensive resistance and a complete immunity to Dragon as well. Clefable, despite its inferior stats to Reuniclus, was way better than it due to this superior Fairy typing. And not only that, Clefable's move pool is more vast. It has options like Stealth Rock, Knockoff, Thunder Wave, superior utility. And offensively it has more options. Incredible special attacks to choose from, and also having Calm Mind and Soft Boiled for healing. Why would you use Reuniclus instead of this new and improved Clefable that does everything Reuniclus can and more, plus it's better defensively? Reuniclus became a much harder sell. Over the years, this has just gotten more and more true as Reuniclus feels more and more outclassed and debilitated by its Psychic typing that has only gotten worse. In Generation 9, Clefable remains ranked in OU, one of the best aged Pokemon ever, whereas Reuniclus is one of the worst, suffering down in the NU tier, nowhere near its career peak of OU dominance back in Gen 5. Any success Reuniclus once had feels like nothing more than a distant dream, as he yearns for the good old days. Reuniclus has had difficulty adjusting to his new contemporaries in the NU tier. He feels that he is above them, and has not accepted his reduced viability over time. A difficult thing to accept. And what about Snorlax? I'm sure many of you know how much Snorlax has fallen off over the years. A once great competitive Pokemon, now terrible. But I don't think you realize just how much Snorlax has fallen off. I don't think you know the extent of it. When Snorlax came out in Gen 1, it is of course one of the strongest Pokemon in the game. And in Gen 2, Snorlax is literally the best Pokemon in the whole game, even stronger than Mewtwo and Lugia and Ho-Oh. Snorlax is so excellent on this game that you have to run it on every single team in OU and Ubers, or you are being silly. It is an auto-include Pokemon. Whereas today in Gen 9, Snorlax is ranked in the ZU tier, which is the lowest possible tier a Pokemon can be ranked in. From the genuine #1 Pokemon in the game to now one of the worst Pokemon in the game. That is an unbelievable fall off. How did this happen? Back in Gen 2, Snorlax was near untouchable, with 160 base HP and 110 special defense. This thing was bulky like nothing else. Its low defense was supposed to be a drawback, but in Gen 2 Snorlax received the move Curse to boost its defense and attack, the new strongest boost in the game. So after a couple Curse boosts, Snorlax felt completely indestructible. Snorlax benefited greatly from the new item Leftovers for chip healing, and it really appreciates the rest and sleep talk mechanics of Gen 2, to heal its status and act while asleep. A Snorlax simply cursing, resting, and sleep talking is simply the strongest thing in all of Gen 2 Pokemon. It is an unkillable blob of defense and offense. Its attack stat, by the way, is 110, which is extremely good. And its move pool is insanely vast, with all the options you could want to target your counters and pick and choose your good matchups. However, Snorlax was uniquely positioned in Gen 2 to abuse this environment, whereas the cracks started to form for Snorlax in just the next generation. In Gen 3, Snorlax immediately started to suffer. It was still OU, but it was significantly weaker than in the last generation. Snorlax suffered greatly from the new addition of Sandstream to the game, and Sandstorm would chip Snorlax and erase its leftovers healing. Snorlax was also incredibly vulnerable to the newly buffed spikes, which can now be stacked multiple times. 3 layers of spikes really eat into Snorlax's HP. Rest was also nerfed in Gen 3, or I should say Sleep Talk was nerfed. It used to be that Sleep Talk could call Rest and heal you again. Now this was impossible. So Snorlax didn't have a way to heal itself and could land on an option with Sleep Talk that just did nothing, which was much worse than it was in Gen 2. In addition, fighting types became better in Gen 3. Fighting is the only type that can hit normal super effectively, and in Gen 2 there just weren't that many in the game. There was Machamp, who was probably the best, but Machamp is not the most commonly seen thing in the world. Now, Snorlax has to worry about Breloom and Heracross and Medicham and Hariyama. Far more fighting types, and far more things with fighting type coverage too. Focus Punch was added to the game, which is a great move against Snorlax to hit it while it's sleeping, since it relies so heavily on rest. Snorlax also had more steel types to worry about in this metagame, like Metagross and Jirachi. Celebi with Leech Seed was a terrible matchup, eating Snorlax alive, using its health to heal itself. And the problems got worse in Gen 4. In Gen 4, there's even more fighting types to worry about, and the move Close Combat was added, which most of the time just one-hits Snorlax. At least Snorlax could maybe live a Brick Break, but Close Combat has too much power. And Close Combat was a pretty widely distributed move. Now there's Lucario with Close Combat, and Infernape with Close Combat. There's Stealth Rock for even more pressure from hazards. And using Rest to heal just feels way too slow in Gen 4. The metagame is sped up considerably, and sitting there cursing and resting is old news. Snorlax feels slow and passive and just not up to standard in Gen 4. It's only ranked OU by technicality, but most Gen 4 players these days consider Snorlax quite unviable, and rarely do you see it in competitive teams. The problems got even worse from there, as mono-normal typing just felt completely terrible for a defensive Pokemon, with fighting being one of the most common types in the game now, which wasn't the case back in Gen 2. Now fighting type attacks are everywhere, so being normal type is dreadful. Also, the power of most neutral attacks against normal have risen. Moves like Draco Meteor, Overheat, Leaf Storm, all these sorts of moves are widely distributed. Things do more stab damage now. So Snorlax is under fire from everything. It's relying on the old antiquated Rest to heal, and just in every generation this problem has gotten worse and worse. So in Gen 9 Snorlax feels actively terrible. Its stats are still good, but its tools are just not up to standard in Gen 9, and its defensive typing of mono-normal, which was once quite good, is now completely terrible. Maybe the worst typing you can have in terms of a mono type. The fall of Snorlax certainly speaks to how Pokemon has evolved over the years. Back in Gen 2, it was a more passive metagame, and over the years, things have just only gotten more powerful, more sped up, and more aggressive. Snorlax once represented ultimate power, and now it represents ultimate weakness. Snorlax once embodied the best strategies in the entire game, and now it embodies the worst, being passive and slow, and being normal type, I guess. Being too normal. Being normal doesn't cut it anymore. You must be extraordinary, and Snorlax is ordinary. Snorlax himself has embraced his fall-off, looking back in pride and honor at the heights that he achieved in his prime. Now, an old man reflecting on the past with rose-tinted glasses. Snorlax Snorlax embraces his new position in the ZU tier, just happy to still be playing at all, and has made friends with some of his contemporaries there such as Beartick, Camerupt, and Appleton. Appleton is his closest friend. And what about Thundurus? This electronic genie, looking like Zeus from Mount Olympus, coming down to impose divine judgment on us mortals. Thundurus in Gen 5 when it debuted was banned from being used in the OU tier. It is an Ubers ranked Pokemon. Thundurus was absolutely excellent in this game, benefiting greatly from the new presence of Politoed with its permanent rain in Drizzle, and the perfectly accurate Stab Thunder it could abuse in this context. Thundurus is incredibly fast. 111 speed is great for the time, outrunning most relevant things. Even has Prankster, an excellent ability that grants priority to non-damaging moves, allowing it to Thunder Wave enemy Pokemon with priority on it. So even if it's on like 1 HP, it's about to faint, about to perish, it can Thunder Wave you on the way out. Even if you're boosted in speed, even if you have a Choice Scarf. Incredible option just to get a little bit more value out of this fella. It even has Nasty Plot to boost itself up and sweep games sometimes. It's fast enough to do so. Now Thundurus did fall from Ubers to OU in Gen 6, which is understandable, because Rain was no longer permanent, and therefore Thundurus did get nerfed as a result of that by proxy. But in Gen 6, Thundurus is still a great Pokemon in OU, still very respectable. That speed benchmark of 111 is excellent as ever. The option of Prankster Thunder Wave is excellent as ever. And Thundurus even has access to knockoff off the back of a decent attack stat, not only for item removal, but for a bit of dark coverage occasionally. It can U-turn to pivot and leverage that speed for momentum and keep the pace up. It was a perfect aggressive special attacker with the bonus utility of Thunder Wave and knockoff. So what happened? Today, in Gen 9, Thundurus is a rather unimpressive Pokemon. It's ranked in the RUBL tier, a real shell of its former self. Well, Thundurus did always suffer from its vulnerability to Stealth Rock. It is a flying type and is therefore going to take a quarter of its HP from Stealth Rock every time it hits the field. This started to become more of a problem in Gen 7 when its speed tier was a little bit less relevant. There are much faster things in Gen 7, and Thundurus was largely outclassed in this gen by Tapu Koko, who is faster and sets electric terrain and has better options. Thundurus has also always suffered from its poor defenses. They're okay for a fast, aggressive Pokemon, but Thundurus still dies pretty easily. It's not great at taking a hit. But even still, in Gen 7, Thundurus still had value for that priority Thunder Wave, and a higher special attack than Tapu Koko has, and still at considerably good speed. It still had things making it worthwhile. But in Gen 8, the biggest blow to Thundurus' career happened, and it lost access to Hidden Power. Hidden Power is a move that most Pokemon in the game can learn, and it's able to change its type based on your Pokemon's IVs. It acts as a universal coverage option, and the Pokemon that benefit from Hidden Power the most tend to be electric types. Electric type attacks are, of course, vulnerable to being completely ineffective against ground type. Ground types are immune to electric, so electric types throughout history have commonly run Hidden Power, with a type super effective against ground, like ice, grass, or water. Thundurus with Hidden Power Ice was so much scarier because it could threaten common ground types of OU like Gliscor, Landorus Therian, Garchomp, and more. Now, without Hidden Power, Thundurus needs to rely on Grass Knot, which is not as good as Ice coverage. Gliscor, Landorus Therian, and Garchomp are all neutral to Grass and don't take that much damage from this. So in Gen 8, Thundurus' viability plummeted, and in Gen 9, it is ranked all the way down in RUBL. Although Thundurus can threaten Great Tusk with Grass Knot, the other common ground types take nothing. Iron Treads is neutral, Gliscor shrugs it off, and Thundurus absolutely hates the Clodsire matchup. Clodsire is a nightmare for Thundurus. Although there's boots now to patch up the rock weakness, it feels like you can't afford to run them. You need the firepower from a Life Orb or something. And it also doesn't feel worth running Thundurus when Zapdos is right there. Zapdos has the exact same electric flying typing, but it has Stab Hurricane. And Stab Hurricane is able to do good damage against the common ground types. Gliscor is pretty bad at taking a Stab Hurricane. Great Tusk just dies. And Zapdos is also better defensively. It has Static to punish enemies for making physical contact. The Prankster Thunderwave option is feeling way worse in a world where there is more status immunity than ever. In particular, Goldengo really puts a stop to this, and Goldengo is able to threaten Thunderous quite well. Thunderous's frailty, as well as the rising speed stat. I mean, things are fast these days. Thunderous is still pretty fast, but there are faster things now. All these have led to the fall of Thunderous over time. A Pokemon that has not aged great. What about Hariyama? I value Hariyama. He has very big hands. He is trained in martial arts and has a very good attitude towards life. Also, when he debuted in Gen 3, Hariyama was a great Pokemon. This is one of the first examples of a bulky fighting type ever. It has a great 144 base HP, which makes up for its lower defenses. It's slow, but it has a great attack stat of 120. And Hariyama is defined in Gen 3 by its access to Knockoff. Knockoff was not a great attack yet, only 20 power, and it's a special attack as well. But it was used mostly for its utility of removing an item, which was still powerful even then, without the buff. Hariyama is the best Pokemon in Gen 3 that gets Knockoff, and that is a very valuable trait. Removing leftovers and choice band from key targets has a massive impact on the game. And it's one of the few free clicks in Gen 3. Hariyama also operates well as a Tyranitar check. It resists rock and threatens Tyranitar with super effective fighting damage. Hariyama is also pretty nice against Blissey and Snorlax, and it even operates a little bit better than most against Gengar because it has guts. So if they choose to Will-O-Wisp you, they'll be doing themselves a disservice because you will gain an attack boost upon being burned and threaten them with a big rock slide or hidden power ghost. Hariyama is a commonly seen Pokemon in Gen 3 OU on balance teams. It has a great combination of being a good wall breaker, having the knockoff utility, and checking Tyranitar all in one. But Hariyama's competitive success was very short-lived. In the very next generation, Hariyama fell off a cliff, simply because they just added way more good fighting types and Hariyama felt antiquated immediately. Hariyama's low defenses and low speed were a massive drawback. Its access to Knockoff also didn't feel as valuable. Clefable stole the show as the new premier Knockoff user, a much better defensive Pokemon. Hariyama's rare access to this move no longer a great commodity. And it got worse and worse as the years went on. In Gen 5, Hariyama is competing with fighting types like Keldeo and Breloom with Poison Heal, and Conkeldurr, who just feels like a better version of Hariyama. Today, Hariyama is ranked in PU, at least it's not ZU, not as low as Snorlax, but still one of the lowest tiers you can be in, the second lowest. A massive fall from grace. Bulky fighting types in Gen 9 include Great Tusk and Okidogi, and even Robot Hariyama, Iron Hands. He's been outclassed by his own damn robot self. That's a terrible fate, to be outclassed by your own robot self. I hope that never happens to me. Hariyama has certainly aged like milk. Most people look at Hariyama and don't view it as a viable competitive Pokemon at all. Most probably don't even realize that it was ever good. It just seems so terrible. We're so used to good fighting types and good bulky fighting types, but once Hariyama was the only bulky fighting type really, the only one worth a damn. It's a shame. It's a damn shame, because I happen to like Hariyama. Some might view Iron Hands as a Hariyama buff. I disagree. I don't think that turning a guy into a robot means that you buffed them. In fact, I think that you should never turn someone into a robot. Very immoral, very dishonorable. And what they've done is terrible. What they've done is very deplorable. Now this is one I'm quite glad about actually. Jirachi. Remember Jirachi? When Jirachi came out in Gen 3, it was one of the top Pokemon in the game. In Gen 4, it became perhaps the best Pokemon in OU. Today, Jirachi is forgotten. No one uses this anymore. It's scarcely anywhere near OU viability. Ranked all the way down in the RU tier. A massive fall from grace for one of the most controversial and powerful Pokemon in old OU history. So what happened? When Jirachi debuted, it was excellent instantaneously. Steel Psychic typing, of course, great back in the day. 4 reasons listed back in the Bronzong section. Same typing, same advantages. Jirachi has 100 in all its base stats, making it very malleable. It can be defensive or offensive, however you want to build it. And it has the excellent ability Serene Grace, which doubles the chances that a secondary effect will happen. Very annoying ability, but undeniably an amazing one. Jirachi famously has Body Slam, which has its paralyzed chance buffed from 30% to 60%, attaching a more likely than not paralysis chance to a good normal type attack is very strong. It also has Ice Punch with a 20% freeze chance, quite high for such a massive impact. Secondary effect, Jirachi is also famous for spamming Fire Punch and just fishing for a burn, like a primitive version of Scald in Gen 3. 20% burn chance is nothing to scoff at. And Jirachi can have Wish Protect defensive sets with Body Slam and Fire Punch to spread status, or it can have Calm Mind sets. It can run Thunder, which has 60% para, and its typing is so great too. It has everything you want in a competitive Pokemon. Defensive value, offensive value, status spreading, Wish support. In Gen 4, this guy got even better. They gave this guy everything in Gen 4. It gained Stealth Rock, the most powerful hazard in the game. U-Turn, the most powerful pivoting move in the game now. And it gained Iron Head, the most controversial new option. Iron Head is an 80 power steel type physical attack with a 30% chance to flinch, of course buffed to 60% with Serene Grace. This guy can spam Iron Head like crazy, and more often than not prevent you from acting at all. Flinch, a very frustrating secondary effect, made even more frustrating when it's so likely to happen. Jirachi mandates in Gen 4 that you have some sort of steel resistance with good physical defense, or you will just get soloed single-handedly by Jirachi, flinching your team to death. Not to mention spreading paralysis and burn in the process. And all of Jirachi's great set variety still applies here, giving it so many options, Calm Mind and Grass Knot and all that. In Gen 5, though, is when the cracks started to form for Jirachi. Jirachi is still good in Gen 5 and still competitively viable, but it significantly fell. And part of the reason it fell is because of a new contemporary that sort of ruined its career. Ferrothorn. When Ferrothorn was added to the game, Jirachi now had a cost for spamming Iron Head. It couldn't just spam Iron Head to its heart's content. Risk-free. Now if it clicks Iron Head, Ferrothorn can come in and chip it with Iron Barbs, and it takes damage itself. It takes more damage than it deals to Ferrothorn, who resists the move and heals it off easily with leftovers. And Ferrothorn can even farm Jirachi, using it as an avenue to get Stealth Rock and Spikes on the field, and Knock Off and Thunder Wave and other such things. Jirachi can Fire Punch against Ferrothorn, but even then Ferrothorn can take it. What if Rain is up? And also even then Jirachi is still taking Iron Barb's chip and hurting itself. Not only was the presence of Ferrothorn terrible for Jirachi, so was the presence of Garchomp, who has rough skin, and outruns Jirachi, and threatens it with Earthquake, with super effective damage that often KOs the guy. Landorus Therian is here now. Landorus Therian tends to be faster than Jirachi, as most sets are. Jirachi doesn't usually run max speed. And that threatens Jirachi with massive Earthquake damage, and lowers the damage from Iron Head due to Intimidate. So there are these common, powerful Pokemon in the game that are threatening Jirachi directly, and also punishing it for using Iron Head and Body Slam and stuff. Also, the item Rocky Helmet was added, and Rocky Helmet is a equipable item that has the same effect as Rough Skin, dealing damage to enemies that make contact. A pretty common item on physical walls like Skarmory. This made Jirachi's life even worse. Jirachi used to actually sometimes be able to 1v1 a Pokemon like Skarmory with enough luck from Paralysis and Iron Head. Now, you're getting Rocky Helmeted to death, and you can't do that any longer. In Gen 6, of course, the same nerf to Steel type that ruined Bronzong's life also ruined Jirachi's life, as it was now wide open to Ghost and Dark type attacks. So it already started suffering from the rise of contact effects, punishing its Iron Head spam. Now it's wide open to more super effective attacks threatening its existence. How terrible. And I believe that as time has gone on, these problems have just gotten worse and worse for Jirachi. They keep making good ground types. They keep doing it. In Gen 9 we have Iron Treads and Great Tusk, of course. Jirachi hates these guys. Jirachi's stats are feeling not the best. 100 in all stats was great back in Gen 4. Felt malleable, felt good enough. Now it's not really good enough. Power creep has caught up to Jirachi. It's no longer the strongest thing around. It's no longer even the most versatile thing around. Many of its attacks are a bit too weak to pose enough of a threat. And Jirachi in Gen 9 is just old news. There are better defensive steel types, better paralysis spreaders, better offensive Pokemon, better Calm Mind sweepers, all the things Jirachi used to do, all its utility and offensive presence. There's something in Gen 9 that will do it better. Jirachi feels dated, it's aged like milk. And I, for one, am grateful. Jirachi is a Pokemon that I believe sold his soul to the great adversary once for ultimate power in a fleeting moment, and now that the power has fallen out of his grasp, he thinks he can tag along and still be a good Pokemon in OU. No, Jirachi, you must face what you've done, the Faustian bargain that you made, and you must suffer the consequences of your actions. Justice does exist, and you are facing the karmic debt before you that you have incurred, and you must pay. You must pay up. I hope that, Jirachi, that you think about what you've done and you try actively to rectify your actions for all the pain you've caused. I truly hope that you do. Perhaps you will never learn, but I'm hopeful that maybe you will learn a lesson from this. And finally, a Pokemon that I quite like, Exeggutor. A strange creature, sentient tree with 3 different minds. 3 minds are better than 1. Exeggutor was once one of the best Pokemon in the game in competitive. Many forget this, but in Gen 1, Exeggutor was excellent. And in Gen 2, Exeggutor was also one of the backbones of offensive teams. Amazing, I know. Today, though, Exeggutor is absolutely dreadful. Ranked all the way down in the ZU tier. What happened to old Exeggutor? Well, in Gen 1, Exeggutor benefited greatly from the power of Psychic typing at the time. Psychic typing had absolutely no drawback and all upside. The move Psychic was excellent, and Exeggutor also had access to Sleep Powder and Explosion, 2 of the other best moves in the game. Sleep is broken in Gen 1, and so is Explosion. Exeggutor is a perfect storm of Gen 1 excellence. Now in Gen 2, the Psychic type was significantly nerfed. There now are moves that can hit Psychic super effectively. Hidden Power added more coverage that threatened Psychic types. The Dark type was added, a new type completely immune to Psychic, and so was the Steel type, a type resistant to Psychic. But Exeggutor held strong, with those options of Sleep Powder and Explosion still being valued on offensive teams. Exeggutor could also take advantage of Thief to rob enemies of their beautiful items. And remember, back at this time, Exeggutor's stats were also solid, and so was its typing in general. 95 HP, decent bulk, and a great special attack of 125, along with Sleep and Explosion for incredible momentum generation on offensive teams, as well as item removal in the form of Thief. Exeggutor is a perfect all-in-one package of offense in Gen 2 OU. And even though it is times 4 weak to bug-type attacks are really not common at all in Gen 2. So that's not much of a problem, and largely its grass typing is a benefit, offering ground resistance, water and grass resistance, which are valued, as well as Leech Seed immunity coming in handy every so often. So Exeggutor is still excellent in Gen 2. In Gen 3, however, is when things started to go wrong for our favorite sentient trio of heads forming a strange tree. In Generation 3, Exeggutor suffered immensely from the newfound addition of the Pokemon Celebi, who has the exact same typing but is largely superior. Celebi has 100 in all its stats, access to Recovery, a vast move pool, and the powerful ability Natural Cure for status healing. Celebi is a staple of the OU metagame, and it generally doesn't feel worth using Exeggutor over Celebi. Exeggutor's ability took a different turn. He was given Chlorophyll, which is a good ability granting double speed in the sun. But it's an awkward one to use in Gen 3. Exeggutor suffers from the fact that Tyranitar can set permanent sand, and Solar Beam gets interrupted as Tyranitar switches in on the field. So even if you want to use Exeggutor as a Sunny Day Solar Beam sweeper, it's a difficult thing to pull off. And generally, Swift Swim and Rain Dance teams are preferred for a similar but more effective strategy. Exeggutor does still have those options of Sleep Powder and Explosion and Thief, which are valued and do give it some niche merit on certain teams, but the low speed and the rise of bug coverage were terrible news for Exeggutor. Because Celebi is so good, bug coverage became a common thing, and Tyranitar's most common hidden power type is Bug. Heracross is more prominent and runs Mega Horn, a massive bug type attack. Even Aerodactyl occasionally runs bug coverage. Speaking of Aerodactyl, physical flying types also rose, Salamence and Gyarados, both of which can run Stab Hidden Power Flying for massive damage against Exeggutor. These were not problems before, but now they are. The rise of powerful fire types were not great for Exeggutor, like Moltres and Charizard, a Pokemon that once commanded such respect that could switch in nicely against a lot of common Pokemon and then output offense with Sleep Powder, Explosion, and its powerful attacks, was now struggling to do that. It was worse at taking hits, more threatened by common Pokemon, and outran less things. There are better sleep setters and exploders in the generation, and Exeggutor is left behind. It's clinging on by a thread to some viability, due to having some niche traits that give it value, but it is a far cry from its Gen 1 and 2 excellence. And the years were dreadful to Exeggutor. Truly dreadful. In Gen 4, U-Turn was added to the game, which affected Celebi significantly, and if it affected Celebi, it certainly affected Exeggutor too, who has the same typing. U-Turn being a prominent bug-type attack seen everywhere is dreadful news for Exeggutor. The rise of Dark and Ghost-type attacks have ruined many Pokemon's careers from Gen 6 onwards, and of course Exeggutor suffered being kicked while it's down from these new additions or new trends. And in Gen 9, who in their right mind would use Exeggutor? A slow, frail, grass type with dreadful typing. Yes, it received the ability Harvest as an alternative, but that's hardly enough to keep it anywhere near relevant. Exeggutor in Gen 9 has fallen off more than almost any Pokemon ever has. A terrible and dreadful fate for a Pokemon that I don't think deserved it. I don't think he deserved it at all. And where's his Mega in Legends ZA too? A classic Pokemon, Exeggutor, you could have given like even larger heads. I guess they gave it a Alolan Exeggutor back in the day, who also was bad. And then they said that that was all you're ever going to get, Exeggutor. A larger tree that isn't even any good. Where's Mega Exeggutor when you need it? It's okay, they didn't even have the foresight to make Mega Muck, so who can trust the Pokemon Company to do what's right these days? To classic Gen 1 icons like Exeggutor and Muck, who have been left in the dust. This is just to be expected. This is to be expected. So who out of all of these do we think has had the most significant fall-off, who has aged the worst? I think that you would have to give it to Snorlax, who literally went from the #1 Pokemon in the entire game, better than Mewtwo and Lugia and such, to one of the worst Pokemon in Gen 9. I'm not sure that there's a starker drop-off you can point to. Perhaps Mew, who was not mentioned here, but Mew is much better than Snorlax in Gen 9. Mew has fallen off, but not as much as Snorlax has. What do you think though, folks? Who do you believe fell off the hardest in Pokemon history? What would you like me to talk about next? Let me know down below in the comments, and thank you for watching.